This is the Sony 600mm f4 prime lens, one of the most expensive lenses you can buy for your Sony full-frame camera. It costs a whopping $13,000 new, but I bet you already knew that. And this, well, this is my backyard and my deck. And this, well, this is the same deck visible in the eye of this particular bunny. If we talk about sharp, I believe that this footage is just that. I've had the lens now for 2 months. I purchased it used. I was able to pick it up for $11,500. What a bargain. I've had the opportunity to use the lens extensively all around Denver in Rocky Mountain National Park, photographing so many different variety of animals and capturing video footage. And I also wanted to compare that lens with this. To this lens, the Sony 200-600 OSS. I bet this is what you currently have and you're wondering, is it worth the upgrade? That takes me back to this particular clip of this bunny. If you're watching this on a big screen, a big monitor, or better yet, a TV, again, you can actually see the reflection of my deck, and that footage, yeah, it wasn't shot with the prime, it was shot with this lens at 600mm. Here's another practical example. I remember being out in Grand Lake, which is really near Rocky Mountain National Park, with this lens, and I remember I had on a teleconverter, so I'm shooting with the zoom lens and a teleconverter, and I captured this image of a squirrel. And the fact of the matter is it's tack sharp, but the ISO was so high, 12,800, that it really degraded the perceived sharpness. So the fact of the matter is both of these lenses produce incredibly sharp images, and I think you can use a teleconverter with both. However, I used a teleconverter over time a lot less with this lens because obviously the aperture begins at f6.3. That is one of the biggest advantages over using the prime. This lens, the prime, is f4, and it's actually sharper than the 200-600 at f4 over the 6.3 zoom lens. However, it's really hard to tell with the naked eye. This eagle was shot in very close proximity with perfect lighting, and it really highlights just how sharp this particular zoom lens, this lens, really is. In fact, all of these images you're looking at now were really captured in great lighting conditions with my Sony 200-600, and I never really felt like, goodness, this isn't a sharp lens. But some of these images, as I look at them right now, I really think about what they would have been like with this lens, because as you can see, this little songbird, it's like on these reeds in my backyard, and you can see those reeds. And this lens really would have blurred it out and created so much more bokeh. The bokeh that comes out of this is absolutely insane and obliterates the background when the proximity to the subject is fairly close. That's one of the reasons I wanted to buy this lens. Also, the main reason I purchased this is because I spend so much time in the field, tracking animals, photographing those special moments. And I've gotten some really interesting close moments lately. And you know what? I want the very best image quality, and that's this. So for me, spending that extra $10,000 to $11,000, I purchased this lens used for $11,500, was worth it. It was worth it for me to spend that insane amount of money because I use this type of a lens more than any other lens I own, except for shooting these indoor talking head type videos. And now let's talk a little bit about the f4 prime. This portrait is such a great example of how it completely blows out and blurs out the background. Now these images of this bear cub are really great in terms of highlighting some of the advantages of this particular prime lens. I was shooting in a canyon. There was no light, the sun was behind a mountain, the ISO was high, and I still shot at f5.6 to try to get the sharpest image possible out of this lens. And those paws look dangerous. and that was it. And I had literally just a few seconds to capture the images and the video that you saw. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about my experience with video with this lens, because a lot of the images that you're looking at were shot at higher ISOs. This image, again taken with the prime lens, has an ISO value of 6400, and I was able to denoise it and it looks beautiful. I also shot this image with, again, a teleconverter. I mentioned denoise because it's a lot harder and more time consuming to denoise a video clip. And I know there's Topaz Video AI. I want to test that out. I probably will. But the last thing I want to do is spend more time editing and in front of my computer. And if I can capture a video clip that's cleaner at a lower ISO value, all the better. And this camera and lens combination allows me to do just that. f4, f5.6 versus f6.3. Another really great example of the power of an f4 and the Sony A1. This image is highly cropped in, the background totally blown out, and I just love the pose of this particular osprey. And these coyote shots were so magical. I was able to capture these coyotes while standing in the middle of the road. I was shooting some elk and they ran through. I had great settings on my camera. Everything was lined up. It was one of those moments that very rarely happens. And this photo would have not looked as blurred out if I didn't have this particular lens. As you can see in this shot, this particular lens creates absolute stunning and beautiful bokeh. And these shots of this osprey really highlight the low light capability of this lens. When I started shooting, I was using the 1.4 teleconverter, but as the light dimmed, I took it off and I was able to shoot f4 with a shutter speed of 1600, and I still had a ISO value of 3200. If I was using this lens, it would have been much closer to 6400, 8000, much more than with the prime. And that is really one of the main reasons why you want to think about using the prime lens. What about acquiring birds in flight with this lens? That's something I was nervous about. And you know what's really interesting is if you're out and about and you shoot birds and you've done it with this lens, I don't think you'll have any problem. At least that's been my experience. And it's just kind of like memory reflex. Your settings are good to go. You're anticipating a bird in flight. Your shutter speed is 2500, 3200. Freeze the action. The bird takes off and you don't think about it. You just do it, and I've had no problem capturing these birds in flight. Now, I will mention that one of the things that can be a challenge is the fact that you can't zoom out. When I was capturing these great egrets, I positioned myself on the beach. I was quiet. I just waited, and slowly they came to me. It's so much easier to let the animals come to you. And I started filming, and because they were pretty far away, I had the teleconverter, so I was at 840 millimeters, and they were a bit too tight in certain scenarios. So sometimes you're just gonna find that it's a lot easier to have a zoom lens, and a lot of people, they feel like it's worth it to take the slight hit when it comes to light, the bokeh that you get with the prime, because you get the versatility of a zoom lens. If you made it this far, thank you. And you know what's more important than the lens is actually finding great wildlife to shoot with. Or you may want to check out this other video that YouTube thinks you'll like. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one. You dig?